Hillary Clinton used to have a big lead in Florida after the conventions this summer, but it has tightened up there significantly. Some polls now show her ahead. Some polls now show Trump ahead. But polling averages right now, which is probably the safest way to look at it, basically show that Florida is a tie. The most populous county in Florida is Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade County also has the largest number of Republicans in any county in the state of Florida. There are more than 350,000 registered Republicans in Miami-Dade County. And what is unique about that population, and therefore what is unique about what it means to campaign for the Republican vote in the swing state of Florida, is that in Miami-Dade County, of those 350,000+ Republican votes, 72% of those voters are Hispanic. And the vast majority of those Hispanic Republicans are Cuban American. Now, this year, the latest poll of the Cuban American vote in Miami shows that Donald Trump is leading with those voters, but not by a lot. His lead there as of last month with those voters was about 4 points. He's going to need to get that number up significantly if he has any hope of winning Florida. Republicans have to run the table with Cuban Americans in Florida in order to win that state. And, you know, the Trump campaign, for all its willingness to throw tradition out the window, for all their proud indifference to political traditions and norms, the Trump campaign appears to absolutely realize that they've got to do what you usually need to do with Cuban Americans in Florida. They appear to recognize that there's no way for their candidate to win in Florida without that critical Cuban American Republican vote. And so, like every other Republican candidate known in modern history, like Mike Huckabee and like John McCain and like Newt Gingrich and like Michelle Bachmann, like even Herman Cain, remember him? Like all Republicans before him, there was Donald Trump this week at the exact same coffee shop they all go to in Little Havana in Miami, a place called Cafe Versailles. There was Donald Trump this week doing what they all do. He has famously bragged that in addition to not smoking and not drinking, he has never had a sip of coffee in his life. If that's true, I don't know what's in his little cafecito cup there, but maybe they made him a teeny tiny tea. But, you know, even if you're Donald Trump, all Republicans agree they must go through the motions and try to goose their numbers with Cuban American Republicans in Florida. That is the only known path to victory for Republicans in Florida. And today, into that tiny, delicious cafecito cup at Cafe Versailles, plopped this from Newsweek magazine. We were first to release advance excerpts of this story last night from investigative reporter Kurt Eichenwald. It's now out. It's Newsweek's cover story. It's called The Castro Connection, How Donald Trump's Company Violated the U.S. Embargo Against Cuba. Kurt Eichenwald's allegation in this piece is that Donald Trump's company in 1998 violated the U.S. embargo on American individuals or companies spending money in Cuba. For political effect, Donald Trump has repeatedly praised that U.S. embargo in Cuba. He has bragged about how he would never violate it. He would never spend money in Cuba. That would be a terrible thing. But Kurt Eichenwald in Newsweek magazine today says that Donald Trump's company did exactly that. And now Donald Trump is denying all of it. Here was Mr. Trump tonight in New Hampshire being questioned about it by a reporter from WMUR.
How do you respond to a report that's out today that says back in the late 90s you violated the embargo doing business with Cuba?
I never went to Cuba. I've never been in Cuba. I never did business with Cuba.
Leave it at that?
Well, there's nothing else to say. I never did business in Cuba. I would tell you very openly if I did. I was not involved in doing business in Cuba.
After Donald Trump made those comments to WMUR in New Hampshire tonight, Kurt Eichenwald responded on Twitter by saying, and I quote, "Proof time." Here's the full tweet from Kurt Eichenwald. "Trump just denied his company paid for Cuba trip during embargo. Proof time." And then he says, names not in story removed, which is explaining what's the redactions in this thing that he posted. To that tweet, Kurt Eichenwald appended an image of what appears to be an invoice from a consulting company called Seven Arrows Investment and Development Corporation. It's addressed to a financial executive at Trump's company at the time. "Dear Mr. Burke, enclosed, please find expenses that were incurred on behalf of Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts during calendar year 1998. The expenses fall into the following categories." And then number one is something involved in a Florida gaming project. Number two is expenses incurred prior to and including a trip to Cuba on behalf of Trump hotels and casino resorts. And the billing amount you see there, $68,551.88. There's then a follow-up note underneath that list of expenses explaining helpfully right there on the invoice that a trip to Cuba like that would have to be sanctioned by the U.S. government. And even if it were sanctioned, it would also have to be technically on behalf of a charity. But it says right there in black and white that the trip was on behalf of Trump hotels and casino resorts. This is an invoice billing Trump's company for these expenses, the expenses of this Cuba trip on behalf of Trump's company. The financial executive at Trump's company to whom this invoice was addressed reportedly testified in a lawsuit that this bill was in fact paid in full by Donald Trump's company. If that is true, that means that Donald Trump's company appears to have violated the Cuba embargo. Trump's campaign manager said today on Twitter that Donald Trump did no business in Cuba and respected the embargo. That said, on the daytime TV show The View today, that same campaign manager also said, her words I think exactly are, "They paid money, as I understand it, in 1998.
Read the entire story. It starts out with the screaming headlines, as it usually does, that he did business in Cuba, and it turns out that he decided not to invest there. You have to read the entire story.
So are you denying that his company spent any money in Cuba?
I think they paid money, as I understand from the story, they paid money in 1998. And we're not supposed to talk about years ago when it comes to the Clintons, but with Trump, there is no statute of limitations ever.
Whether or not we're supposed to talk about things that happened in the 90s, that's Donald Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, today on The View, of all places, trying to say that Trump didn't violate the embargo because he chose not to invest in the country, but he did spend money there in 1998. If he did spend money there in 1998, that's a violation of the embargo. Don't concede that. So they appear to be kind of up a creek with only a really, really terrible paddle on this. Since this reporting went live today at Newsweek, also Mark Caputo, veteran Florida political reporter who now works at Politico.com, Mark Caputo has also bolstered these reports of Donald Trump having interest in doing business in Cuba at the time. Mark Caputo spoke with the president of the U.S.-Cuba Trade and Economic Council today, who told Mark Caputo that in the mid to late 1990s, quote, "We were approached by a Trump organization senior executive who visited my office, and we have the correspondence in our file where the organization, meaning the Trump organization, was interested in exploring potential opportunities in Cuba." So not everybody in the country is going to care about whether or not Donald Trump ever did business in Cuba. But Cuban-American Republican voters in Florida are probably going to care about this. And they're probably going to care not just about the question of whether or not Donald Trump did it. They're probably going to care about whether or not Donald Trump directly lied to their faces about it when he went to South Florida in 1999, the first time he was thinking about running for president, and then when he went there this week, both times to talk about how hardline he is on Cuba and how much he always respected that embargo above and beyond his own bottom line because the cause of the Cuban embargo is so close to it. This new scandal for the Trump campaign will not matter everywhere in the country, but it might matter a lot somewhere where it really, really, really counts and could make the difference as to whether or not he gets elected president. Stay with us on this.